The disagreement your co-founder says out loud is almost never their real objection. You've probably lived this, right? You've had the same argument 3 times. You thought you resolved it all 3 times, and then it keeps coming back. And the story you tell yourself is that there's something wrong with your co-founder, right? It's their fault. They're not focused on the most important issue. Usually, in this type of setup, the relationship itself is fine, but what broke is the format of the conversation you're having, which is making it structurally impossible for the real issue to get raised. So here's the question I want you to answer. How do you have a hard conversation with your co-founder in such a way that helps them feel truly understood and not just heard? So those are two very different things, and the gap between them is actually where most of the damage in a founding team accumulates. I'm Dr. Matthew Jones, and I help co-founding teams fix exactly that before it costs them their company. Now, there's a structure for this type of conversation, and it's called reflective dialogue. It's phase 2.1 of the co-founder conflict navigation system, and it's pretty straightforward. One of you is going to take the role of the speaker, and the other is going to take the role of the listener. And the entire purpose of this exercise is to help each person feel heard and deeply understood. It stems from Imago couples therapy, and it's called Imago dialogue in that context. And I've adapted this specifically for founding teams. It has 6 steps, and by the end of this video, you're going to be able to run one completely on your own. So I'll also highlight a couple of failure modes to make sure that you can avoid those. But I want to start by saying why ordinary conversation fails, because that's the entire purpose of the structure, is because normal conversation doesn't do a good job here. So standard conversation is a simultaneous broadcast, right? Both of you are partly listening, partly building your own response, and partly trying to manage your own reactions to what's being said. Now, under normal conditions, this is absolutely fine. Like you're high functioning people, you can manage this. But under the stress and pressures and accumulated emotional debt that often show up in this co-founding journey, it collapses almost immediately. Because each of you is going to feel compelled to share your point of view, which you view as the truth and the correct piece, capital R reality. And then neither of you end up feeling heard by the other person. That's not a relationship problem. That's a format problem. And the structure is exactly what fixes the format problem. So when stakes are high and emotions are raw, you need structure, because structure creates safety, and it gives both of you really clear roles to lean on when that stress is accumulating. So here are the 6 steps I'm going to go through in detail. Slow down, decide who speaks first, share with intention, listen to understand, switch or take turns, and close with care. So number 1, slow down. There is no version of this type of a dialogue that is going to work under those normal operating cadence speeds, right? Like the structure itself will help slow you down, which is part of the benefit of doing this. And prior to engaging in this type of dialogue, take a couple minutes, right? To take some intentional breaths, slow down, take it easy, feel your feet on the floor. And if you need to, name that intention out loud in the relationship, saying something like, hey, Mark, I'd like to slow down a little bit so we can keep this conversation productive. Like this slowing down and resetting your physiology is going to be super important to having an effective dialogue in this context. And there's also going to be times, by the way, whenever you're too triggered to remain present. Like that's totally human. Like this is not going to work in every single moment. And so when that happens, just say it, right? Like say, hey, listen, I really want to understand what you're saying, but I'm noticing that I'm too activated right now to really take it in. Can we just pause and come back to this, Friday at 2 p.m. or whenever I can be more present? Like when you just try to push through and override your physiology, it ends up creating the superficial appearance of listening, but without any of its real substance. And so you're both going to walk away believing that you had a conversation, but neither one of you is going to feel good or understood. There's not that emotional resonance or not that real empathy. And then like weeks later, whenever you revisit this conversation, you're going to realize you ended with completely different takeaways and different versions of the reality because you weren't able to actually synthesize and meet and construct a new third version of what actually happened. So this raises a really important question, and failure mode where a lot of teams get it wrong even prior to starting, which is the second point: decide who speaks first. So the counterintuitive part is that the most emotionally regulated person is the one who needs to listen first. So you're going to let the more emotionally activated person take first role as speaker. Because if you're flooded, you're angry about a decision that you felt like blindsided you, or you feel hurt about being left out, like your nervous system is in a reactive state. And in that type of state, you can't actually take in what your partner's saying. So letting that activated person go first gives them the room to feel heard and understood, which is going to help bring the temperature down. It's going to help them get a little bit more content and regulated. And so then by the time they're actually done, they can listen. It's also really important that as you think about who should be the one to speak first, that you don't turn it into a blaming exercise. Like there's no prize for being the calm one, nor should there be like this negative label if you're the one who's consistently sharing first. The entire purpose is just to take a second to get a pulse check of who's more grounded. And if that's you, volunteer to listen. And now I want to switch briefly to the speaking side of things, because that's where a lot of these conversations can get lost. So number 3, share with intention. When it's your turn to speak, stay on your own experience. What happened, how it impacted you, and what you need now. I call this in touchy-feely interpersonal dynamics at Stanford, we'll call this staying on your side of the net. So part of what's so important is I want you to imagine this kind of net between you and your co-founder. So on one side of the net are your internal thoughts, feelings, your internal reality, the story you're telling yourself about what's going on in their head. And on the other side of the net are your co-founder's inner world, their inner thoughts, feelings, reactions, how they were impacted by what you said. And then in the middle, in this kind of net area, is the shared observable reality that both of you agree actually occurred. So that's like the observation. So crossing the net sounds like this: you never follow through, or you're just controlling, or you're always undermining me. Like every single one of those statements is a mind reading statement, a label, a judgment, an analysis of the other person, like what's going on in their head. And that makes your co-founder defensive. And it makes sense, right? Because they feel like they need to defend their reality, which makes it a lot more difficult to listen and to help you feel understood. So if you are crossing the net, you're creating the very conditions that you say you don't want. And if you do know nonviolent communication, the speaking half of this is like, those are the best practices, right? And so you do want to be using the standard I message. I feel X when you Y, and I need Z. That is simple, efficient, and effective. But one more thing on the speaking side, and this is one that like is kind of a quiet failure mode. You really need to chunk it. Don't make this a 20-minute monologue. Share with them the opening stanza and the opening movement, not the entire symphony, right? Like you want them to be able to reflect it back. And so give them breaks so that they can reflect it back. And, if you just dump everything all at once, then they can't hold it. They prioritize the wrong thing. And then you end up feeling correctly like you weren't even received and heard, right? And so that puts a lot of weight on the other person. And their job is one that, they've never been taught before. And so I want to talk a little bit more on this listening side. So 4, listen to understand. This is truly the heart of this exercise of reflective dialogue. And there's 3 different moves inside of this. So as a listener, you're going to want to mirror, you're going to want to check, and you're going to want to validate. So in terms of mirroring, you're going to just reflect back what you heard. So early on, I have people say this like exact phrase. I say, I heard you say, that's the sentence stem, XYZ. All right. So you're going to reflect back, and you're going to use, mainly you're going to paraphrase their words, and you're going to try to use their words, especially keying into those parts that are more emotionally loaded. And so then, I'll give you an example here. So listen, I heard you say that when I changed the product roadmap without consulting you, it made you feel blindsided and, devalued. And it made you even question whether or not I truly see you as an equal partner. Now, what you're not doing, you're not adding your own interpretation, your own spin. You're not going to say, oh, well, what I really think you mean is this. And you're not going to correct them, even if they say what you perceive to be something that is incorrect factually, right? You're not going to do that. You're just going to reflect it back, and then you're going to ask, did I get that right? Or is there more you'd like to add? Now, this is a really important part too, because you're helping them, you're reflecting back their material that they've shared with you. And if you've done a good job, they're going to start to feel heard, but it also gives them the opportunity to elaborate a little bit further, to get a little bit deeper into their own emotions. So this is super useful. It's a therapeutic technique. And then the last move is, after you've gone back and forth a few different times, and they feel like, yes, you've totally heard me. like you've got all of the context now. That's going to be your signal then to validate. And validation isn't necessarily one thing. It actually sits on this entire spectrum from basic acknowledgement on one side to real emotional contact on the other. So validation is simply acknowledging the other person's emotional experience, right? It's their reality, and it doesn't mean that you agree with their perception. So this can look like something like, "Hey, I hear how frustrating this was for you." Or the easiest, lowest hanging fruit here is just to say, "Yeah, that sucks." Right? Like you're acknowledging what they felt. And that alone is something that can be an unlock. Now, if you want to go a little bit deeper, sympathy is mentally grasping the difficulty, even if you've never actually felt it or been there. So it's like, oh, yeah, from your perspective, I could see why you're feeling so overwhelmed, especially given how much is riding on this meeting. Right? So you're just kind of saying, look, I can truly see that if I put myself in your shoes, given X, Y, and Z, I would feel that too. Right? That makes sense. Empathy is another step deeper. And so this is feeling with them. And so letting some of their experience really resonate with you emotionally. So that would look like, hey, you know, when you describe feeling shut out of these conversations, I can really feel how isolating that must be. Like that really hurts, as an example of empathy, because that you're saying like, yeah, like I'm vibing with that, I'm feeling you. Compassion is empathy turned towards action. So this is saying, I feel how draining this is for you, and I want to help figure out how we can structure things differently. And so at every single level, regardless of whether you just choose that simple validation that sucks or something a little bit deeper, avoid pity. Pity is talking down to the other person. It's basically you saying, "Oh yeah, like poor you, that must suck." Like don't do that. And tone here matters, right? And so let's assume that you get through all of that. Like one person shared, you've reflected and mirrored back. You've asked them to elaborate. You've done this a few different times. Then you share the statement of validation and empathy. The next step is a really important handoff. So that's five. Switch. So this is whenever you're going to take turns. And what you're going to notice is in an ideal world, if there were no time bounds to this type of a meeting, you're going to see that other person exhale. Their shoulders are going to drop. Like that's your cue that they're starting to feel heard and understood. Realistically, though, like I understand we have to time box meetings. And so what I recommend is trying to have an equal amount of time. So both of you will kind of, one person is a speaker, one person's the listener, and you're going to allow that speaker, like you're going to do that back and forth kind of mirroring and such for a set period of time. Let's say half an hour if it's an hour meeting. And then you're going to switch roles. And then the person who is listening is now going to be the speaker, and the person who's speaking is now going to be the listener. And that way you can really start to get deeper and better understand each of your experiences and recollections of that moment, which then starts to help bridge the gap between your two perceptions, which leads us to the last part, which is how do you land this plane? So 6, close with care. You don't need to resolve everything in this one single meeting. What you need to do is to leave the meeting with a little bit more clarity than you came in with, or feeling slightly more connected than whenever you started. So there's a couple, like four things to keep in mind. One, check for the completion. Like, is there anything else you want me to understand before we wrap up? Like, just ask kind of this open-ended question to help start putting a bow on it. Two, you're going to want to reflect together on what you learned, right? So you might say out loud, yeah, what really stands out from this is, or what I understand better now is, and you're going to want to be then really explicit about your next steps. So whether that's another meeting on Thursday to continue the conversation, or if it's just like, hey, I'm going to just sit with what we said and I'm going to reflect on what you shared, or if there's a more specific action item, like you're going to want to be really explicit about that for follow up later. And then I also find it really beneficial if we can provide some acknowledgement for the work you just did. Like if you can express some appreciation or gratitude, like, yo, thank you for being willing to have this conversation with me. I know this can be difficult. That can land. That goes a lot further than you think. And then as you make these agreements really clear and explicit, then you know exactly what to retro and what to review in your next meeting. So that's the method as a whole. You're going to slow down, decide who speaks first. You're going to share with intention, listen to understand, then validate, switch, and then close with care. So let me briefly mention a couple of failure modes so that you know exactly what to look out for. Sometimes the listener is so overwhelmed and frustrated and resentful that they can't put real effort into understanding the other person's experience, and it just can't work. So other times, like the listener uh, is just defaulting to all those other ways of listening that I was saying before, like just thinking about what they're going to say, etc. If that happens, ask questions, follow up, take notes. Like you can shift this to make it work for you. So a lot of founders I know will take notes during this so that they can actually tune in to the moment and to what the other person's saying. And also, like if you're that in that state, like I said earlier, call for a break, don't push through. Um, the most common objection I hear, though, is honestly that it feels like a major waste of time. Like it feels slow, inefficient, cumbersome. And sometimes it is, right? I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But there is a line from Imago couples therapy that really resonates with me. And it's something that I share with founders pretty constantly, which is it's the long road that makes the whole trip shorter. So slowing down in this initial wave of conversation produces fewer secondary waves and secondary impacts downstream. And so if you measure this change over a longer term time horizon than just the conversation itself, it is easily the cheaper and more efficient option. It just doesn't feel that way in the moment, right? But if you slow down, take the extra time up front, it's going to make the entire relationship go a lot faster and a lot more efficient. And so, the last thing I'll say is if you really don't buy it, or if your co-founder thinks this is a complete waste of time, you really need to find some leverage. Like one thing that I'll say to folks, especially once they're honest with me about what they want to shift, is I'll say, look, like you've already told me you want this partnership to work and you want to improve how you're making decisions. You don't want to keep those things stalling in the way that they are because you really want to unlock that next stage of growth. And yet, what you're doing on your own hasn't resulted in those changes, right? And so, what do you actually have to lose with trying this new method? Nothing. So try it. And yes, this can feel a little bit unnatural at times, but that's exactly why it works when the natural way doesn't. So if you want more information on reflective dialogue and all of its subcomponents, please check out my book. As a reminder, your co-founder relationship is too important to leave to chance. So please subscribe and grab the co-founder effect below, and I'll show you exactly what to do with it.